Shmi climbed the dune, her feet sinking back into the sand, a race against gravity. She pushed herself through the last few steps, her calves aching as she pulled herself to the top. As with every morning, she hadn't allowed herself to look out at the view as she climbed, and now, with her hands on her knees, catching her breath, she thought about this moment to come, the reward for her effort. 3, 2, 1. She stood up and looked out at the view, at the dunes stretching all the way to the horizon. A simple view, a sparse one, but to her it was beautiful. Wide, open, empty space. Perhaps others would find the Tatooine desert dull, but then of course they may not have lived as she had. Years of working below ground, in cramped quarters and windowless rooms, shuffled between owners and sold on a whim. Shmi had learned firsthand, when your master sees you only as a possession, access to the outdoors is not guaranteed. Anyway, those were old memories. They were different now. They no longer turned up in her head uninvited. They were hers to recall, and she didn't. Why would anyone dwell on the past, she thought, when there's this perfect desert panorama to gaze upon? Once her urge to examine the land was sated, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, slowly releasing her breath as she stretched her arms up to the sky. She felt the pleasant ache, the release of stiffness in her arms and neck, satisfying pain that recalled her previous day's duties when she'd fixed the faulty exhaust vane. At this sudden reminder, her face bloomed into an unstoppable smile, and her eyes became wet as though tears could soon follow. She was reliving the moment, imagining herself back at the Lars homestead, checking the hydroponic chamber's gauge and realizing her repair had been successful. At the sight of the dials moving correctly and the return of the soft hum from the carburetor's motor, Annie had entered her mind. He was always the engineer of the family. She had imagined him being there with her, watching his clever mother figure out the repairs all on her own. They would laugh about it, and he would playfully tease her. This warming vision had lost none of its power overnight. This morning it still delighted and moved her. More pleasing evidence, if evidence were needed, that she had done the right thing. She would never regret sending her son away. She would only be happy and proud. Shmi savoured the moment, but soon it was time to start heading back to the homestead. As she slid down the dune and began heading out towards the final 2 vaporators, she felt the mushrooms in her pocket, counting them with her fingers. Carrying her shoes in the other hand, she walked barefoot, pressing the warm sand between her toes. She thought about this strange pleasure, the grit, the abrasive feeling against her skin. The air and the sand would soon heat and become an obstacle, an ingredient of the day that would demand the respect of all those who called the desert home. But the mornings were different. A window of opportunity where the land welcomed its guests and was open to connection. She was staring down at her feet to help keep balance. She was thinking about the day to come, about what she might find at the final vaporators, and what that would mean for today's breakfast. She didn't see the figure watching her, didn't sense him. But if she had, would it have made any difference? Her body flopped unconscious to the ground as the stun net struck and wrapped around her. Bosk advanced quickly. He pulled her arms behind her back and applied the cuffs to her hands and feet. He rolled her over with one hand while the other trained his blaster to her head. There was no need. The stun net had knocked her unconscious, and besides, this wasn't his usual quarry. She wouldn't have been able to fight back if she'd wanted to. The Trandoshan lifted her over his shoulder and started the long march through the sand. It would be many hours before he'd reached the Tusken encampment. At an abandoned factory in Coruscant's industrial district, a robed figure was receiving a transmission. The caller, appearing via hologram, was knelt on one knee, with their head bowed to the floor. They remained in this pose as they spoke.
I leave for Geonosis tomorrow, Master. Poggle assures me construction goes well.
That is for me to determine, Lord Tyrannus. The hooded figure spat. Be ready to call on the leaders. The time of war draws near.
As you wish, my master.
And the woman?
It is done. My tracks are covered. She was kidnapped by bandits.
And you trust your contact?
He has proven himself, master. He survived the box, the first to do so. Credits are the sole concern of the bounty hunter. He was paid handsomely.
You have done well, my apprentice. Await my command. The caller gave a small nod of the head, and then they were gone. Palpatine walked to one of the factory's large window frames, the glass long since smashed. Dawn was breaking over Coruscant. He searched into the Force, and once certain he was alone, removed the hood of his cloak. Had involving Dooku been a mistake? His apprentice was no fool. He may have worked out the link between mother and son, and that he was aiding in the development of his own replacement. No. Distance was needed, he reassured himself. And besides, what if Dooku does suspect? To serve, that is his simple task. His ambitions to overthrow me are given. It is the way of the Sith. He stared out past the smoking chimneys to the distant lights of the political district. His thoughts now turned to the boy. Soon he will have nowhere left to go. I will be his only sanctuary. Across the planet at the Jedi Temple, the terrible visions were seeping in. The contorted face warped with fear, the screams whipping round, coming ever closer, calling, pleading, a name repeated. It was his name. In a cold sweat, as though tossed from the underworld back to reality, Anakin woke up. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this fanfiction. I just wanted to jump on the end here and say thanks for watching, because it's my first ever YouTube video, and it was quite tricky to make it places just because I didn't know how to use any of the software. I've had to sort of teach myself, and it was quite a steep learning curve. But it was fun, and I've got a few more fanfictions written. So if you like this one and you want to see more, maybe like and subscribe and stay in touch, and that'll encourage me if nothing else. In terms of this story, these are scenes from a sort of a bigger story that goes into the details of why Bossk is there. But it's kind of complicated because there's lots of scenes and lots of dialogue, and I'm not really ready to tackle that yet. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Would you have done it differently? Is there things you would have liked to have seen? Would you have had Bossk as the bounty hunter? If you got any opinions, you can write them in the comments below, because it's fun to talk Star Wars. But yeah, otherwise, thanks for watching. Hopefully see you in another video soon. Yeah, bye bye.